Urban Meyer often talks about the success equation, E plus R equals O. Your experiences or events plus your response will give you your outcome. So talk to me more about what that means to you and how have you used that to be successful today, especially as it relates to building teams and emotional intelligence.
Jordan, I, I'll tell you what, that when I learned that concept at Ohio State as a player and coach, it was incredibly important then. But then you throw in everything that's happened in 2020 and even now in 2021, I would say it's even more important now, where there's so many things that are outside of your control, so many things that, in a sense, we can't necessarily have an influence over, but there are things that we can. So going through that equation of E plus R equals O, the event, whatever it may happen that you can't control, but your response that you can, it really empowered me to think about what is within my locus of control. What is it that I can, help dictate? While I can't, help dictate, a global pandemic, I can't help dictate, in a sense, a social justice movement and all of these things that are happening in our world, but I can dictate how I respond, to that. And I think our response, why that equation E plus R equals O, or the outcome, our response has a much heavier influence on the outcome than I think we realize. So it was such an empowering equation for me. And as it relates to team building, right? I think a lot of times we will downplay our influence on other people, right? It's I think easy to look inward and focus on ourselves. We downplay the influence on other people. And so there's a concept called the Pygmalion Effect, basically meaning that how you respond to a situation is going to have a direct influence on someone else and have a direct influence on their belief of what's possible. And somewhat of this flywheel going around and around. So, for me, I've really thought about when it comes to team building, when it comes to emotional intelligence, being very self-aware internally, having a level of internal self-awareness about my action, my response, what would this mean for others, but then having that external self-awareness in, okay, if I, respond this way, if my tone is negative, or if I bring a layer of negative energy into this conversation, what is that going to mean? What is that going to do for others? It's a layer of what's called second order thinking. So that's really how I've used that equation just as a framework, for myself, for some internal self-awareness, but also externally thinking about, okay, if I respond in this way, how is that going to affect others around me?
Yeah. Dude, wow, I love that. I mean, that's just so awesome. And like you talk about, it's so relevant for today. It's so relevant as far as we often focus on the events part of that equation. We often focus on our experiences, and with that is completely out of our control. Like you said, that there's nothing that we can do about the events that happen, about our experiences that we have been given in our life. But one thing that we 100% have control of is our responses. And you talked a little bit about your self-awareness, your identity, and knowing yourself. Surprising enough, how did you get to that place? And for me, like, it's a journey that looks different for everybody. And so how did you come to your own self-awareness and get to know yourself so that you can then have awareness of what you are doing and how that affects others, as well as, then noticing what's going on around you?
A great question, Jordan. I think first and foremost, when you think about the great innovations of the world and great innovators, whether that's Apple, whether that's Tesla, whether it's Microsoft, these things are just category defining and world changing. It often comes from a high level of thoughtfulness, right, about that process. And so to reverse engineer that of what that means to me, typically when I think about innovation and creating change, sometimes you have to slow down before you speed up. And so, and I know we talked a lot about football, but also as a solo entrepreneur at one point, spent a lot of time just with myself and my thoughts in reflection, in really thinking about not only my actions, but who I was, right? I had a lot of experiences where I would put myself out there, whether that's public speaking, whether that's pitching an idea, whether that's, in a sense, sharing a dream, right? Putting myself out there in situations. There is no better way to find out who you are than when you put yourself out there, right? It's one thing from a sports analogy, right? It's one thing to stand on the sidelines and talk about what you would like to do. It's another to actually be in the game. And so for myself, as I thought about, hey, how can I first of all slow down to speed up and watch tape on myself and make sure I'm studying my own actions, but how can I make sure I'm out there in the game, right? And so I've really looked for those opportunities to put myself out there in order then to have a chance to reflect on, hey, what just happened, right? That
Mm-hmm.
was something new that I did. Example, starting a podcast. I'm, getting in front of people and now talk. I'm organizing events. I'm, creating a technology, things that you may not have done before. That is really, you find out, adversity simply reveals who you are, right?
Mm.
So it's not saying, hey, go put yourself in bad situations, but I am saying put yourself in situations where you're going to find out who you are,
Yeah.
right? It's very hard to find out who you are. Certainly staying safe at home in quarantine, but finding these environments where you can continually to challenge yourself. That
Mm.
ultimately was one of the biggest takeaways I got from my experience as an athlete is, in order to get stronger, you got to put weight on the bar.
Yeah.
Your legs aren't going to get stronger if you put the same weight on that squat rack. So how can you replicate that in your own life, whether that's as an entrepreneur, as a professional, as a father, as a mother, husband, wife, whatever it may be?